Very good morning to you, viewers, and welcome to this episode of The Living Legends, brought to you by Meyer Vitabiotics and Science Integra. I'm your host, Dr. Ameet Patki. In this episode, we have somebody whom I can call as a citizen of the world. Born in Ceylon, then now Sri Lanka, did his research and initial training in Singapore, and then blossomed in the United Kingdom. He has been awarded national awards from 3 countries, past president of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, London, past president of the British Medical Association, and past president of the International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, the FIGO. An exemplary leader and somebody whose career has been driven by strong altruistic desires to improve services for women globally. So join me in welcoming Sir Arul Kumaran Sabratnam, Prof. Arul, to most of us. Oh, I think it's Prof. Arul. Come, let's welcome him. Hi, Prof. Please come in.
Thank you very much, Prof, for being with us on this early Sunday morning, taking your time off, and to spend and reminisce with us your life and times on this episode of Living Legends. A very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Ameet, and thank you very much for kindly inviting me for the program. Thank you.
You were born in Ceylon, and I'm sure all of us have very fond childhood memories. Could you narrate some incidences of how you spent your early childhood in Sri Lanka?
Thank you. I was born in a city called Jaffna, which is north of Sri Lanka, and had my primary education in Jaffna. But then I traveled to Colombo and Patki and other regions in Sri Lanka because my father was an agrarian officer, and wherever he was transferred, we went along and studied in different schools. It is always a pleasant memory to have studied in different cities, because even when I go now, I go and visit these cities and see my old schools. And those teachers who are still living, I go and visit them and have a chat. So it is a very pleasant memory of the past.
You also told me that you were sent to the boarding school very earlier on. What was the reason for you to go into a boarding school so young age?
Well, I was studying in Jaffna Central College, which is very well known for sports as well as studies. But I was a bit too playful, playing basketball and athletics and soccer. And my father thought I'm not studying because I play and then come back and sleep as soon as I finish my dinner. So one morning, he asked me to get into the car, saying that he would drive me to the Central College, but the car was going in the opposite direction. It was passing various small villages, and 10 miles beyond, we entered a school, and he took me to the principal and said, "This is my son who is going to join your school." I had no idea whatsoever. I had no clothes, I had no bicycle, nothing. So I was left there. Well, I took it up well because the principal didn't say anything. He said to the peon, we call, "Take him to class such and such." So I went there, and then during the interval, the librarian, who was also the sports instructor, called me and said, "Well, you can come and stay in our house and we'll make arrangements." And then he took me for lunch, and then in the evening when I went my father brought a suitcase and left it there for me to stay. So it was a bit of a room shock, but I didn't cry or do anything. I just managed and graduated or went to the university from Meyer College, where I went to school for 2 years.
So from a very young age, you showed your exemplary qualities of self-independence and being brave and to face the world. You also did your medical education in Sri Lanka, and then you did your Part 1 FRCS and your Part 1 MRCOG, and that took you to UK for 6 years. But sadly, when you returned back, you realized that there wasn't any suitable job for you in any of the 4 medical colleges of Sri Lanka. So looking for green pastures, you took up a job in Singapore in the National University of Singapore Hospitals, where you rose up the ranks and you became the head and professor at the NUS. You spent a good 15 years in Singapore, and it still puzzles me to this date that why did you leave Singapore?
Thank you. It is a good question which is asked by a number of people. I was very happy in Singapore. As you said, I joined as a lecturer, then senior lecturer, professor, and head of department. But I had 3 children, and my youngest was 5 years when my 2 elder ones were university age. So my daughter and son, elder son, went to the UK to study. And we didn't have the heart to leave the 5-year-old behind without the 2 siblings. And I had a number of offers from various universities in the UK. And one offer came from University of Nottingham at the time when my son and daughter were going to the UK. So I decided I will also take the job and be with them, because my parents were in London and my wife's parents were in London. But the tipping point was I listened to a lecture by the former health minister, and he gave a talk at a dinner saying that there are 3 important things to human beings: money, time, and energy. And 3 things, 3 stages of life: young age, middle age, old age. Young age, God gives you time and energy, but no money. Middle age, He gives you energy and money, but no time. Old age, He gives you time and money, but no energy. He was trying to explain that as we get older, we get unhealthy and so on. He said every 5 years you have to take a plan and look at the reserves you have in money, time, and energy. So after that speech, I went back home and took a piece of paper and put how much of money I got, time, energy, and the only lucky thing was time. So I thought, okay, this is the right time to move. So I decided to auction my house, took the job in Nottingham and moved in 1997. And I had no regrets for doing that change, because I looked after my parents and my wife's parents and so forth. So it was good.
So you were back with your family, and there were these pull and push moments, as you said, factors which all combined, and it was UK's gain that you joined the University of Nottingham. And then a few years later, you were invited to apply as a chair and professor and head of OBGY at the St. George's Hospital in London, which you took it up, and then you retired as an emeritus professor from St. George's in 2013. So that must have been a very long period at St. George's. Your memories of St. George's, I know you're still there with St. George's, but your initial memories of how you worked yourself up the ladder and become and sort of change the workforce in the St. George's Hospital.
Well, I think the most important thing is to plan. So when I had the call from Stuart Stanton, who was professor of urogynecology, and Mr. John Griffiths, who was professor of bacteriology and so forth, asking me to come and have a look at St. George's. I visited St. George's at least 6 times. In the mornings I go there and meet with the midwifery staff and the nursing staff one day with a consultant, one day with the medical director and the chief executive and so on. And every day when I returned back to Nottingham, I put a plan. This is what I'm going to do. And that is what I did in terms of planning, and submitted a plan to the principal of the medical school. These are the changes I will bring, provided so much of funding and people are given.
You were a stranger to the United Kingdom, in a way, a foreigner, but you worked up to the pinnacle of success in the United Kingdom. The current president of RCOG, Edward Morris, has recently spoken about the George Floyd incident in the US and has accepted and admitted that racism exists. What is your take on racism in the workforce in the United Kingdom?
Well, the issue about racism exists everywhere. I don't think it doesn't affect. I mean, if you take India, there is a different caste system. Sri Lanka, there are different language and ethnic issues. But the degree to which it is apparent or non-apparent is the key issue. So the UK is improving from the time I was here many years ago to the current time. But there are issues with certain sectors of people and certain people. So even in the medical profession, there are what we call as bad apples or whatever it is. So there is.
Yes.
The issue is about institutional racial issues. So in some disciplines, it is a little bit more compared to other disciplines. So in medicine, I would think it is much, much less compared to some of the uniform services maybe, and that has to be sorted out.
Okay. Let's listen to what President Edward Morris has to say, and he has fond memories of spending time with you. So can we have President Edward Morris, please?
Professor Sir Arul is an absolute legend. He has undoubtedly shaped the careers and lives of thousands of obstetricians and gynecologists around the world. And one of those people is me. Without the support that he gave me early in my career, I know for sure I would not be here where I am now, and for that I will forever be grateful to him. He supported me very early on when I wrote a few pieces of work for the college, and maybe he saw something in what I did, but he then made me, after a few years, chair of the Safety and Quality Committee at the college. And from that point on, things, well, you can see where they ended up. Arul, I wish you all the very best. I hope this goes very well for you. I will enjoy watching the broadcast as always, and thank you very much for everything that you've done for me, the college, but most importantly, the women that we look after. Thank you.
Would you want to say some words on Ed Morris, sir?
Thank you. No, I'm delighted that Morris was elected as president last time, because he's a very bright young man who is dedicated to his profession. I met him in Norwich, and then I met him at the college at different committee meetings. And as he said, I thought he has the potential to work for women's health and the college without any doubt. And he would be able to sacrifice. He was a bright chap. And so I recruited him into the college and appointed him as chair of the standards committee. And then he rose from there to become president now. So I'm really delighted, and I'm most grateful to his kind words. Thank you.
When you were the professor at the St. George's Hospital, in 2005, you were invited by the Department of Health to investigate on the sudden rise of maternal mortality in Northwick Park Hospital. Before we come to that incident, let's take a break. So ladies and gentlemen, join us after the break to chat with Sir Arul Kumaran Sabratnam after the break.
I've got what you need, you know what I mean. You hate, but you see, I can take you there, but you gotta come clean. You know what I mean.
I need to stay physically fit and mentally sharp. Wellman Vitamins drives my success.
Welcome back after the break, and we are in conversation with Sir Arul Kumaran Sabratnam on this episode of The Living Legends, brought to you by Meyer Vitabiotics and Science Integra. I'm your host, Dr. Ameet Patki. As we were discussing before the break, you were invited to investigate on the Northwick Park incident. Could you tell us a little more and how you helped them to reorganize and work towards new standards that you set up?
Thank you. It was quite a challenging times in my life because the government body called Healthcare Commission, now they call it Care Quality Commission, investigated the Northwick Park Hospital maternity unit because there were public complaints and they had 10 maternal deaths in 3 years, which is far, far higher than what one would expect. So they identified me to go into the hospital the following day after the report came and asked me to put into place various actions so that the maternal mortality can be reduced. So I went and met the new chief executive because the previous chief executive was asked to leave, and then put a framework of clinical governance, essentially to look at the staffing level, the quality of staff, the educational programs, the audits, the investigation of complaints and so forth, and introduce training programs as well as revise the guidelines. And I had 3 or 4 maternity sisters who were given as additional staff and implemented this. And the next 18 months, we didn't have a single death. But I recorded the incidents in what is called the maternity dashboard, so which gave the total number of deliveries, sections, the incidence of PPH, admission to ICU, etc., and showed gradually the incidence, adverse incidence was coming down. So at the end of 18 months, because there were no maternal deaths and the ICU admissions were coming down, they lifted the sanction. So I was very proud of the achievement because the tough decisions had to be made. There were few who got suspended, few who had to leave, new staff had to be recruited, but overall it became quite a useful thing. And that stirred me on to even go into the college politics in some way, because I introduced maternity dashboard as a good practice tool. And also later we might discuss about consultant on call, because these are 2 important areas which I thought should be adhered by all the maternity units to improve quality of care.
Absolutely. I mean, you conceptualize this word of maternity dashboard, as you said, to monitor the clinical outcome, workload, morbidity, and risk incidences. I think that was commendable because Liam Donaldson, the Chief Medical Officer of the United Kingdom, commended this innovation and also mentioned it in his 2 successive annual reports to the country. I think that itself is a feat of how much it was appreciated by the health ministry and the government. You also came up with an RCOG good clinical background report on the duties and responsibilities of a consultant on call. Can we have a little on that? Because I'm sure that there must have been a lot of resistance to what you wrote in that by your colleagues. Tell us something more on that.
Yes, essentially, if you look at the confidential inquiry into maternal deaths, which was published at that time every 3 years, it was very clear 60 to 70% of maternal deaths could have been avoided, or the standard of care was not subnormal. So when we looked into that, what are the different reasons? And one of the reasons were that consultants were not attending to serious cases. Now, we did not know whether it is because they didn't know which case to go and whether the juniors called them in time and so forth. So we thought at that time, Tahir Mahmood was my vice president of standards. So I sat with him and said, I want this written and these are the conditions. Severe PPH, recall back to the theatre, if the registrar is doubtful, etc. The consultant should be by the side of the patient. And this was flagged up in the consultant meeting. There are 240 consultants who said, have I become a dictator to tell them what to do and so on. I said, no, I'm sorry, but the reality is if my wife or my sister or my mother comes to the hospital with this condition, would you say a junior doctor to look after? It's a life-threatening condition. You must be at the forefront. Otherwise, you're not worth to be a consultant. As you said, there are complaints. There are lots of emails, and I replied back very politely saying, this doesn't refer to you. You are a good person, but there are others who are not doing the work properly. So we have to manage the situation. But certainly it was not a popular move, but it is something which is wanted, and I'm very happy we did that.
Yeah, because the results are now to see how clinical governance has absolutely changed maternity services in that country. I think you gained a lot of name and fame, as you said, after both these, the Northwick Park and your involvement in the maternity dashboard and clinical governance. You became the vice president of the college, and soon you took over the reins of the college as president in 2007 to 2010. Tell me, what were your achievements as president of the RCOG?
Well, when I contested for the post, the college has three main functions. One is actually international, one is education, the other one is quality of standards of care. So I have done as a head of department in Nottingham and St. George's, so I had some idea about the quality of standards, then added on by the maternity incident in Northwick Park. I had been in education for 30 years. I was FIGO Treasurer and Secretary General for many years. So I had the qualifications to look after the college in all these main three portfolios. But what I wanted to achieve is to come out with standards in obstetrics, standards in gynecology, which was started during Professor Alan Templeton's time. The standards are different from guidelines. Standards are what should be there in terms of basic outfit to provide care, what guidelines, who should be there, etc. So that was achieved. And the second one was the maternity dashboard and consultant on duty. And the third thing which I wanted to do is, I was a bit worried when I looked at the finances of the college every month, every 3 months. It was going down, and the two elements which was really striking was we were giving more and more money for pension funds because the investment returns are not adequate. The second thing was we were on a crown property, it's not college property. So the lease, the money which we had to give for the lease was going up and up and up and up. So these two are dragging the finances down. We were on negative. So in 2009, at a college council meeting, I said we had to sell this property, sell the lease and buy our own property and move out, which happened 10 years later. But I'm glad that I was able to achieve that by forward thinking that we should do it at some time or other. The same way I did for the FIGO, a building of FIGO House.
Absolutely. I think you brought a lot of financial stability, and what you proposed in 2009, we are seeing the fruits now in 2020 or 2019 when the college moved to its new own premises, and that is like an asset building for any organization. I think you also introduced the e-learning for intrapartum fetal surveillance when you were in your presidential year in the college. During the same time, you received the honorary fellowship of the Royal College of Medicine in 2011, perhaps the only obstetrician to have been awarded this prestigious accolade. You were also appointed as a visiting professor to the Institute of Global Innovation at the Imperial College. You must have worked very hard because you have around 270 indexed publications, over 32 books, and over 200 book chapters. That is a real feat. How do you balance your life? How do you balance your clinical, professional life, research life with your family life?
That's a very difficult question, but my sincere thanks goes to my wife, Gayatri, who are looking after the family. So the house, we consider like a parliament. I was Ministry of Finance and External Affairs. She was Ministry of Internal Affairs. And so she was
Home Minister, yes.
And that was very useful. But also being head of a department, it is our responsibility to stimulate the younger generation to produce papers, produce chapters, produce books. So one of the reasons I accepted publication of books from publishers is to give chance to the younger generation, not only in my department, but from India, from Sri Lanka, and so on.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity. The difficulty is when the chapters or articles come, I have to revise it and so on. So it's extra hard work, but it was worth it because people still remember that we worked together in producing this article. So I think
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
I remember reading your Oxford Handbook series of obstetrics and gynecology, and also your Essentials in Obstetrics book, which I read for my exams for part 2. And of course, the Monroe Care Operative Obstetrics, which I think is like a Bible still today read by most postgraduates across the world. When you do so much, I mean, you have told me once that you try and have a 25-75 balance, 25 for the family and 75 for the profession. But I also think it's something that you have for breakfast, that you have so much of energy. So what do you eat for breakfast every day that you can sustain all this and more till you come back home?
Well, it's simple. Like in the UK, it's some cereals or other things, but I like the breakfast, especially when I come to India. I go and have idli and dosa and so on at home. I like to have a curry with a little piece of bread or string of rice. So I think I like the traditional Indian Sri Lankan breakfast, and that gives me the energy to go throughout the day.
Lovely. So we'll take another break now, and when we come back from the break, we will meet Sir Arul Kumaran in his capacity as a FIGO president and how he reached to that great achievement after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Well Man and Well Woman, the UK's #1 vitamins for men and women. Live life well. From Vitabiotics, the UK's #1 vitamin company.
Welcome back after the break. You are watching The Living Legends, and our guest today is Sir Arul Kumaran Sabratnam. We were discussing, sir, about how you got into the FIGO. In 1988, you had your first brush with FIGO when you were part of the local scientific committee in Singapore, which hosted the FIGO then. Subsequently, you moved up. As you said before, you were the treasurer also at the FIGO when you initiated buying assets for FIGO office, and that's how the FIGO building in London stands today. But tell me something on your FIGO presidentship and what were your main achievements as FIGO president?
Okay, so I think it's a long history, so I can't suddenly started presidency. In 1985, Professor S.S. Ratnam, my boss in Singapore, was the president. And he took the Singapore conference in 1988. Sorry, that was in Rio. So at that time, I was asked to help the local scientific program committee. That's why I got involved for the 1991. And 1994, that Congress was in Montreal, and Professor Jack Shearer asked me to help with the scientific program. Professor Ratnam was the scientific committee chair. And in 97, I met Professor Shirishet from Mumbai and Professor Fathallah in the executive board meetings, and they encouraged me to go as treasurer. So I became treasurer in 97. For 6 years, I was running the congresses, collected the money, which formed the basis for building the FIGO Society. Then 3 years, I was Secretary General, so we had the 50-year celebration. So I wrote the history of FIGO for 50 years with Professor Hans Ludwig. And then I gave a break for 3 years because I was focusing on the college. When I came back, I said we must have a grant. So we started the PPIUD, Postpartum IUD initiative, first in Sri Lanka, then in 6 countries, including India. So overall, from 2013 to 2020, we have got a grant about $17 million with overheads coming to FIGO. But also we have institutionalized the program in 6 countries in 48 institutions. And now it is done nationally in most of these countries. So I think I have done what I wanted to achieve, and I'm very happy that things are going on well, even now with the PPIUD initiative.
Perfect. I think FIGO, you were lauded worldwide for all that you have done, including one of your most favorite projects of postpartum IUD. And then you had all these recognitions coming your way. You were bestowed with the Honorary Fellowship of Obstetrics and Gynecology from the USA, Canada, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. You also were bestowed with the Honorary Membership of Obstetrics and Gynecology from Germany, Spain, and Malaysia. And to top it, you were honored with the Honorary Doctorate of Science from University of London, Athens, Sweden, Sri Lanka, and Ukraine. Today, we were trying to get in touch with Jack Sierra because we know you both have a very long association. For the viewers, John Sierra, Professor and Chair Emeritus, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology from the Northwestern Medical University in Chicago, Illinois. Unfortunately, because of time zones and some logistic constraints, he couldn't come live, but he sent me a very, very excellent note, which I want to read to the viewers on your association with him. He tells me that please tell Professor Arul that I think he's one of the best international leaders in our specialty. Indeed, all of us who have been associated with FIGO agree that he's one of the greatest presidents that we have ever had. During his time at FIGO, the organization grew and prospered and took on some wonderful new programs that have enhanced women's health. Most recently, he served as the key person in the FIGO postpartum IUD program in 6 countries in the Southeast Asia and Africa, and this program is a model for the future of organizations like FIGO. He goes on to say that I've had known Arul for a very long time, and I have been present and have also spoken at his valedictory in London a few years ago. I have fond memories of the two of us traveling to the Antarctica. Wow, some years ago with the Chilean Air Force. If you mention this to him, I'm sure he'll remember the excitement that we both have had on this trip. Then he has gone on to thank me for asking him to speak on such a wonderful person. That is really amazing. Antarctica is one, and then being with the Chilean Air Force is something different. Tell us something on this.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Jack, my dear friend, for his fine words about me. I'm most grateful to him. I'm most grateful to a lot of people, including all the past presidents, Professor Ratnam, Professor Shiri Sheth, Professor Marcus Epala, Analda Costa, Professor Fathallah, who was the president when I was treasurer. And so I learned a lot from all of them. Well, the incidents about Antarctica was when we had the FIGO conference in Santiago, Chile. We had some difficulties in organizing the conference because the convention center was sold to a cattle market, and they had difficulty in getting back the venue. So the health minister, in return, after we finished the conference, took us to Antarctica because nobody can go unless you get special permission.
Yes, yes.
We went to Punta Arenas, and from Punta Arenas, we flew by an Air Force plane, and there are no regular seats. You had to hang on to ropes like this. And Jack was seated next to me. I was getting scared, so he was holding my hand and said, "Don't get worried, we are all right." So it was an experience.
Yes, of course, it is an experience. You said your greatest happiness was being knighted in the Queen's birthday honor list for service to medicine in the year 2009. But you also have received two other national awards, one from Sri Lanka and one from Cyprus. Can you tell us why were these bestowed on you?
Okay, so if we start with the UK, UK give national awards twice a year. Queen's Birthday Honours Award in June, and then in December the New Year Award. And they have a system where about 20 or 30 people in the knight or dame category for the ladies, and then CBE, Commander of the British Empire, then Order of the British Empire, the Member of the British Empire. So these 20 odd people selected every 6 months are not by one committee, but there are a committee for sports, philanthropy, music, medicine, and so on. So I was selected by the medicine committee, most probably following the work I had done for the Northwick Park Hospital at St. George's. We had issues and so on, and production. So we wouldn't know who proposed us and who seconded us, but the committee came to that conclusion. So I was delighted because it's the first 20 is a top, and of the 20 there will be 3 or 4 sportsmen, 3 or 4 medicine, and so forth.
Yes.
I was in Cyprus in 2013 when I retired from St. George's London. I was asked to help out as a foundation professor in Cyprus with the University of Nicosia, the first medical school to start there, and it's a branch school from St. George's. So I went there and revamped and started the curriculum, the hospital teaching. But in addition, I worked with the Society for Midwives, Society for Neonates, and Society for Obstetricians, and brought all of them under one roof and had regular teaching sessions and helped them build and work unitedly. So that became quite important. And I started a mobile health clinic in a mobile van to go into small areas to do glycosmias, hemoglobin, blood sugar checks, and so on, to give some experience to the medical students, but also it helped the local populations in small villages and so forth. So the president of the medical school naturally proposed me for an award. So he gave me the Citizen of Cyprus Award last year. And Sri Lanka, I've been associated for more than 20 years, mainly with the Sri Lankan College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. I go regularly for meetings, sponsored a number of programs, sponsored a visiting chair for the medical school, and so on. So I've done a lot. And so the medical school and the Sri Lankan College chose my name for an award called Sri Lanka Ranjana for International Citizens. So I'm pleased with all 3 awards. Certainly something which I treasure.
Yes, of course. And it is an honor to us that 3 countries have bestowed their national awards on you. You were also made as an international member, Institute of Medicine, National Academy of Sciences from the United States. Then there was a period in your life where you displayed exemplary statesmanship qualities. And that incident was the death of Savita Halappanavar in 2012. Tell me, how did you get associated with this? And you created a movement in that country, and you brought about a vast change in their Abortion Act. Tell me something on this.
Thank you. So it's a very emotional sort of story. I was seated in my office at St. George's, and I had a call from Ireland asking me whether I would chair the Savita Halappanavar inquiry. She was an Indian dentist who was living in Galway, and she got admitted with ruptured membranes in 19 weeks. There was clinical escalation of signs indicating she was going into sepsis, but they're listening to the fetal heart, and the fetal heart was present for 3-4 days, so they didn't take any action, because doing an illegal abortion, they go to jail for 13 years. So they didn't know whether they could do an abortion or not. So there was a confusion amongst the obstetricians and gynecologists whether they can do an abortion even in a life-threatening. You ask 2 QCs or barristers, they'll say you can do, 2 will say no, and 2 obstetricians will say no, 2 will no. Anyhow, to cut the long story short, I mentioned that I gave 4 recommendations out of that inquiry, and one of the recommendations was the medical and the legal profession should get together and change the law. And subsequent to that, there were 2 or 3 other maternal deaths which could have been also avoided, but they didn't do because the woman said she was going to commit suicide. They didn't take anything, and she committed. So there have been cases before, and there was a rumbling and keenness to change the law. So I teamed up with the Irish Family Planning Association and said there was an organization called Citizens Bureau, 100 people of different walks of life. We organized lectures about human rights, about abortion laws in different countries, etc. Had Rebecca Cook from Toronto coming in and WHO people coming in and so on. So we changed the mindset of the Citizens Bureau, and then we conducted a poll saying, would you do an abortion for rape and incest? Would you do an abortion for non-medical reasons, for congenital malformations? And got a vote. And there was a majority voted they would support abortion. So we asked the Parliamentary Select Committee to conduct an inquiry, and we all gave evidence. And in that evidence, people are accusing me of saying that one parliamentarian pointed a finger at me and said, you are an abortionist. I said, well, I'm an abortionist. You're also an abortionist. I support legal abortion. By not supporting legal abortion, you support illegal abortion.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, that momentum, then I wanted the professional organization, the obstetricians involved, they got involved. So there were a lot of parties working, but I was like a small wheel in a big machinery of cogwheels trying to support. And even before the referendum, the last week, I was there a few times to give talks. And the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health, Prime Minister is from Mumbai, Virat Kaur.
Yes.
So he also supported my couple of videos, the Health Minister. But the day when they had the polls done, that night, the Irish television had an interview with commentators, and they said, what do you think made the change of the people? And the chap said, the professor from London. I was like,
so you were not the small thing in the wheel, you were the wheel. Remember that.
I think it is telling an emotional story appeals to people that we have avoid and so on. So I think I played a small role, and how we wrote a couple of papers about how to remove the shackles in Ireland, and I'm delighted that I was involved.
Yes, I've seen some of your photos which we subsequently saw on some road shows, you actually talking to people and getting a big yes vote in their referendum. And that, I think you led the team. There were lots of people, yes, we have to acknowledge them, but you were the brain behind that, and you brought about a sea of change, which I'm sure you'll be remembered for a very, very long time. Prof, you also were the president of the British Medical Association in the year 2013. At that point, you wore a different hat. You spoke and you advocated for climate change. Tell us, how did this come about?
Well, the British Medical Association is a little bit different organization compared to professional colleges. It's mainly a trade union. So they have a chairman who is elected for 5 years and a president who is elected for a year or two. And I was a president, so I'm a non-political person looking into the ethics issue, the non-political angles of the British Medical Association. So when they asked me and invited me whether I would be a president, I accepted it. They had to go through the usual motion of going through the council and so forth. And I decided I should work on climate change, increasing the voluntary activity of doctors, and also the human rights angle of providing care by organizing seminars once a year for medical students from different schools to come to British Medical Association and listen with a teacher as well, and then go back into their medical school and talk about human rights and delivery of medical care. So the climate change agenda was for me to bring all the other colleges together under one arm, the College of Anesthetists, Physicians, and so on, and to discuss how each college can participate, because we can't be a bystander. All the professional colleges have to be taken. So that was my principal aim of taking that agenda, and it worked quite well. And there are a number of organizations in their own institution as well as through their membership try to help in bringing about some change in climate.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that has become a very, very big movement, not only in the UK, but worldwide. We'll take a break now, but when we come back, we will talk to Prof. Arul on his association with our organization in India, Arul and Foxy, after the break.
The pandemic and the forced lockdown has given us an opportunity to introspect, to stay connected with our friends, family, and colleagues. It's also given us an opportunity to rediscover ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as I take you back many decades to rediscover our mentors, our teachers, and our true well-wishers as I chat with them regarding their lives, their trials, their tribulations, and how they faced success and failure. Every Sunday from 7 June, 11 a.m., I bring you one fascinating personality in The Living Legends, brought to you by Meyer Vitabiotics and Science Integra. Join me on 7 June.
Welcome back for this last part of the chat with Prof. Arul in The Living Legends, brought to you by Meyer Vitabiotics and Science Integra. Prof, I was talking about Foxy, our association, and in Foxy, we always have considered you as part of us. So tell me how you got yourself involved with Foxy and the various projects that Foxy is doing.
Thank you. So my journey started way back in 1985 because Professor S.S. Ratnam, who was my boss, used to go to Foxy meetings, and so he said, come and present a few papers. So I did that. And then I was involved with Professor Bhaskar Rao in writing some postgraduate books. So I was a little bit more involved, and then Professor Palaniappan from Chennai.
Yeah.
The real involvement with the Foxy activity was when Professor Usha Krishna from Mumbai was taking over, because there was a meeting in Chennai just before she was to take over in New Delhi, and she called me to her side and said, I must meet you tomorrow at breakfast. And she said, you must run a postgraduate meeting for me in New Delhi. So I organized and ran a postgraduate meeting. I came to know a lot of people from then onwards. Every year I have been coming, maybe 1 or 2 years I must have missed, but I contributed scientifically in that way, made a lot of friends, enjoyed coming. And so the journey grew. And then not only the Foxy main meeting, then people call me from Mumbai meeting, Chennai meeting, Visakhapatnam meeting. So whenever possible, I accommodated the request because I enjoyed interaction with the people and also giving whatever I know. Of course, it was hard work at times to prepare some new material, but it was fully worth it. So I'm most grateful to Foxians for having me come to their meetings and to talk to them about various science.
I remember on one occasion you flew back almost a week later to come back to India to attend another meeting. So I know you care for India and you have India right in your heart. I have one very close friend of mine and somebody who knows you very, very well, Dr. Jaideep Tank. He's presently the Secretary General of Foxy. He has been the past president of the Mumbai Obstetrics and Gynec Society, and he has a few words on you, your relations with him and with his family. So can we have Dr. Jaideep Tank, please?
Thank you, Ameet, for asking me to speak about Prof. Arul. There is something called a word association test in psychology. The questioner presents a word to a respondent. Participants are instructed to respond with the first word that is associated that comes to mind. When I tried this test, the first word that came to mind when Prof. Arul's name comes up is grace. He is gracious in conversation, correspondence, compliments, and accomplishments. I met Prof. Arul for the first time when I was a very young boy, several decades back. My father, Dr. D.K. Tal, was a good friend of Prof. who had come as a visiting faculty from NUS in Singapore for a conference in Mumbai, and Prof. was staying in our home. In the evening, after the conference as everyone was sitting, my dad casually asked the Prof about his lecture at the conference. What he said sounded absolutely fascinating, and we asked him if he would mind giving the talk to us again. He immediately agreed. So I fired up the projector, Prof arranged his slides in the carousel, and that is one of my first memories of him. One of the great academicians of the world, and yet so modest and humble that he was willing to reiterate a presentation he had given in the morning to hundreds of people, to a family of 6 persons, simply to enlighten us with his wisdom. After the presentation, I remember asking him if he travelled a lot, because he spoke so well that everyone must want to invite him. He went to his room and got his diary, and even then I remember being astounded with the number of assignments and invitations he had penciled in his diary. Not only was I very impressed with his achievements, but what stands out for me most is that even when I was such a young boy, he spoke to me like an equal, with not even a hint of impatience or condescension. My family has been very fortunate that we have Prof in our lives, and we have unfailingly benefited from his wisdom. I always learn something new every time I meet him, and I don't mean just academically. There is so much to learn from how he conducts himself, how he interacts with people, how he is the first to reply to emails to the extent that I wondered when he actually sleeps, how he keeps up with the times, how he travels across the world without getting worked up about missed flights, missed airport pickups, and not always the best accommodations, how his presentations are always seamless, logical, and extremely lucid, much like the man himself, how his leadership enables others to achieve more, and how he always has time for everybody who would like to speak with him. I can tell you that getting out of a conference hall with Prof is probably one of the most time-consuming tasks, because there are always so many delegates who stop him to chat, ask questions, take selfies, and he's invariably kind and gracious to all. He is the epitome of what Diane Ryland said about charisma, that charisma comes from being more concerned about making others feel good about themselves than you are making them feel good about you. I'm sure that all of us who are fortunate enough to know Prof. Arul come away after meeting him feeling better about ourselves. I don't know what meeting all of us does to him, but that is the person he is. He is truly a man for all seasons.
So that was Dr. Jaideep Tank, a Secretary General of FOXA, speaking on Prof. Arul as a person, as a human being. And we could not have agreed more on how he described you, sir. We are all in this pandemic times. So what is it that you're missing in these COVID times?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, what I'm missing is actually human interaction. I've been always very social, well-being, trying to meet people, and first I must thank Jaideep for his extremely kind words. I still remember meeting him as a young person and also his family, because when I come to Mumbai, the family with whom I stay is mostly with him or occasionally with Usha Krishnan. So I met not only professional but family friends, and they have been always kind to me. And Professor Tang was very dear to me because we used to talk about Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and so on. So I was educated well by Professor D.K. Tang. So what I really miss is actually the social interaction in addition to scientific interaction. And quite a number of weeks I spend in India every year. So certainly I miss that. Otherwise,
Yes.
I'm quite happy seated in the house and enjoying.
You're looked after well. You're looked after well by your wife.
Absolutely.
Fed well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. I've been privy to one of your lectures in Malaysia where your first slide said, traveled, still on the road. And your last slide said, unfinished life journey. So are there any unfulfilled ambitions that you have now?
No, I think throughout my life I have been very keen to encourage the junior members of our specialty to come up in terms of writing, talking, and so on and so forth. So I've done it in different capacities. And there comes a time then you have to let go. They say climbing a mountain is easy, but climbing down you have to be very slow. Otherwise you will tumble and fall. So what I do now is actually to help people with whom I have worked and also from other places to help with their manuscripts and so on when time permits, because there's always not much time. But I'm not very keen in taking responsible positions like a president of an organization or a professor. I still continue to teach in the University of Cyprus. At the moment we are doing by WebEx, so I'll continue undergraduate and postgraduate teaching. But otherwise I don't want to take a responsible position where it taxes your mind and body too much, because I think the time has come to let the younger generation take over. I encourage them and try to support them rather than trying to do it myself.
I beg to differ on this. I think you still have it in you as a statesman, maybe to become an ambassador to the UN or WHO, or as an ambassador to some country, because you have it in that. You have that enduring nature where you sort of consider the person next to you as somebody very close, and I think you will be a good negotiator in this world. You have also said that, go on.
No, I said thank you for the...
You have also said that this is the time for giving your time, giving your money, and giving your energy. And I think that's a very, very good thought on somebody like you who, to me, seems to have achieved so much and now wants to give back to the society. Our viewers may not know, but once you are knighted and you become a sir, you are inducted into a college exclusively for such people, and you are offered to have a coat of arms. Now, this coat of arms is your family symbol. It represents your qualities, your family. And Sir Arul Kumaran has a coat of arms. Would you like to tell us what that coat of arms is? I will be flashing the picture of your coat of arms, but if you could explain to us what it means, sir.
Thank you, Ameet. So when somebody is knighted in the United Kingdom, the Queen's office writes to you and say that I'm eligible for coat of arms. So there is an organization called College of Arms. So they invite you to come and attend an interview. And it's not a short interview, it's a couple of hours of interview, and they take notes. So they ask, what am I doing? Where was I born? What religion? What was my father doing? What did my wife bring as flowers to the wedding? How many children? And they take copious amounts of notes. I remember about 6 pages they take, and then they send you home and ask you to come back again in a few weeks' time, and they take they do a literature search, and they say the wall of the Nallur temple was of red, green, and white, and 3 children like that, and they construct the coat of arms for you. So the coat of arms is only for me, and it can be passed down the tradition to the males, not for females, which is an injustice in some way. But My son can't use my coat of arms without changing the color. He can't change the design, but he can change the color of one or two.
Okay.
And the tradition, I'm called a knight bachelor, like MBBS, Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor. Bachelor means you can't pass your things down the line. That is the reason of knight bachelor or Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, and so forth. The coat of arms was constructed, and the coat of arms have roses and jasmine flowers in a place where my wife brought for the wedding. Was carrying granary horn with grain spilling out, indicating my father's job. A crown-like structure with my 3 children, and below that was a wall-like structure which is red, green and white, indicating the Marble Temple. So I think they do it quite well. And you are also given a piece to write. So I wrote service and sacrifice. So that's what my motto for the coat of arms. You can construct your own motto for the college, and you'll be registered in a registry of the College of Arms, so nobody else can reproduce it.
I mean, this is a very, very thoughtful thing that you put your birthplace, your father's vocation, your 3 children, and the rose and the jasmine that your wife Gayatri brought on your wedding day. I think that really speaks of the person that you are.
A leader takes people where they want to go. But a great leader like Prof. Arul takes people where they necessarily do not want to go, but where they ought to be. And that is the distinction between a leader and a great leader like Prof. Arul. As Jaideep said earlier, you come back feeling refreshed after having met Prof. Arul. Sir, today you have made me and my viewers understand what true humility and humbleness is. I'm honored and grateful to have had this wonderful chat with you. My cell is constantly buzzing with people asking me, requesting me to ask some questions of their choice. But that would be for some other time. You have a great Sunday, because you have made my Sunday a memorable one. Cheers to you, sir, and hope to see you in person soon. And thank you for the viewers for having spent their Sunday morning with me chatting with Sir Arul Kumaran Subratnam on this episode of The Living Legends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ameet, and thank you for the listeners as well. It's been a great pleasure to spend the time with you and your team. Thank you.